on that, and there it is. And so just to get started, we can pull up our slides and start sharing the presentation. Great. Pam, did you want to start with your opening slide and then I could do the...
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. So I'm Pam Sanchez, and I've worked at the Sacramento Tree Foundation for many years. And the spirit of our mission has not changed since the organization was founded as a nonprofit in 1982. And that is that we want to make our communities as livable and lovable as they can be. And we know that trees can be a huge part of what makes the community great. So really quickly, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I have been educating about trees and talking with folks in the community about trees at the Sacramento Tree Foundation for well over a decade. And now as the community education manager, I run a variety of programs around tree education for all ages. I am also an arborist certified by the International Society of Arboriculture, and I have a degree in urban forestry from UC Davis. So this workshop that we're doing today is a new collaboration with the Citrus Heights Water District, and we are very glad to connect with you and speak about trees today and about saving water and how that goes hand in hand. So a couple of quick housekeeping notes. I don't think you have the opportunity to have yourself off of mute, but if you do, please remain on mute during the presentation. I would love to answer your questions. I would love to know what you want to know and what I can dive into a little more. But please type any questions you have into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the panel. And I will address all of those at the end of the presentation.
All right, and just for our portion, the Citrus Heights Water District, thank you, Pam. We're really excited about this class. It's actually our first tree class, so yeah, we are excited to get going and get on the topic. But before we start the class, I wanted to remind everybody that all WaterSmart classes are posted to our YouTube, and you can find either, our YouTube is Citrus Heights Water District at YouTube, or you can find it on our website. Also, I wanted to remind everybody about the programs and rebates that we offer. So we will offer WaterWise house calls where they'll do free smart irrigation controller water audits. And then also they have a free smart irrigation controller program. So if you sign up for the program, you could get a free smart irrigation controller. The rebates that we offer are ultra low flush toilet, pressure reducing valve, and high efficiency clothes washer. If you have any questions about that, you can go on our website or call that number or email our water efficiency email. And so the bottom email address right there is our rebate page, and then below that is Sac Tree Foundation. So, oh, and two other things before we get going. I wanted to let everybody know, if you signed up, you probably saw it already, but we have these lovely tree watering buckets. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to see, but Sac Tree Foundation gave us these tree watering buckets. And if you would like to one of these, you can go into our front office and get them from the customer service reps. Other than that, after the webinar, you will be getting, or one lucky participant of this webinar will be getting an email about the Green Acres gift card that we're raffling off. So it's a $100 gift card, and we'll be doing a random number generator throughout this class, and we'll let you know if you win. So Pam, without further ado, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Chase. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Sacramento Tree Foundation. At Sac Tree, we like to describe our work that we care for trees from seed to slab, from seed to slab. And what we mean by that is at every single stage of their lives, from little acorns to little seeds to planting, and then as they grow and get taller, we are caring for them. As mature trees, we monitor them. And then at the end of their lives, after they've already given us so much, instead of having the logs go to the landfill, we take them and mill them into lumber and slabs to be further enjoyed. With this overarching comprehensive philosophy, we run a wide variety of programs to support those goals. So we work with many local neighborhoods and communities to support their needs with tree stewardship and planting. And we really are focusing our efforts on building relationships with communities that currently have less tree canopy. Like in the photo here, that's taken of Midtown looking towards downtown, and it's a very treed area, whereas other parts of our region do not have that same kind of canopy, right? So one of our most well-known programs is our over 30-year partnership with SMUD, where we provide free shade trees to everybody, residents, businesses, schools, all across the county. Well, that's something we've been doing for a very long time. Whereas one of our newest programs, like I mentioned, is our reuse of urban grown wood. And our urban wood rescue yard sells that milled lumber and live edge slabs that folks can build whatever we want with so that the tree's life can be extended through the use of its wood. And the education efforts, which is primarily where I'm involved, range from teaching adults, such as workshops like this, to working in third grade classrooms, for example, as well. All right, so let's dive into the guts of the program here about trees and water savings. That is our goal today, as is how to know what the best type of tree to plant is to reach those goals. So I want to start by sharing that one of our unofficial mottos at Sac Tree is the right tree in the right place. And what I mean by that is that it's really important to select the right size tree for your planting spot in order to both maximize the benefits that you're receiving, but also to avoid issues that you could have in the future. So picking the right size for the space becomes really key. In addition to the size, you also want to select tree species that are a good fit for your landscape. So you want to think about, for your particular location, how can the tree best benefit you? And most commonly in our really hot climate, that means planting a tree on the west side of your house, on the east side, or the south side. So, your building is getting the maximum cooling shade, right? And then we're also thinking about the size, like I mentioned, so it's not causing a problem in the future, either for your foundation or for the sidewalk or the utilities, things like that. And we're going to talk more about how much space we recommend leaving when we talk about some of the tree species in a few minutes. In terms of the type of tree that you choose, I encourage you to look for trees that really thrive in this area and don't mind our hot, dry summers. We have a mini drought almost every year just with the nature of our Mediterranean climate. So that's something key to think about. And also, I want to highlight how diversity is really important. For example, if your neighborhood has an abundance of one type of tree lining the street, perhaps consider planting something different in your yard. Maybe you want to add a tree and you see that this type of tree that's all along your street does really well, but maybe in your backyard, you want to do something different. And that's because if that one species gets hit with an unexpected pest or has some kind of other issue like that that comes up, your whole neighborhood would be overly impacted. You want to avoid a monoculture of tree species, right? So think about something different. And there are so many different types of trees here. And I hope to introduce you to a few of my favorites in a minute. And lastly, you also want to pick a tree that you like. Pick a tree that has characteristics that you want because it is your yard after all, right? And there are so many diverse options, such as, are you looking for a tree that is deciduous or a tree that is evergreen and going to keep its leaves all year round? Are you particularly looking for very fast growth? Or are you more interested in the aesthetics of the fall color or flowers that the tree has? that type of thing. So all things to consider to get the right tree in the right place. When you're planning the right tree in the right place, a key recommendation is to get an appropriately sized tree for the spot. So I mentioned that, and here's a couple examples on either extreme. Um, so when you think about it, you know, the tree trunk, the canopy, and of course the roots all take up space. And you can avoid problems with hardscape being damaged by just having proper selection and planning a little bit, right? So I show a sycamore, the base of the sycamore in that top photo, and it can grow roots on the surface. That is something that sycamore trees can do. And in that case, it's not always a great choice to plant near sidewalks. So you can see in like the top right corner, the sidewalk is starting to lift a little bit from the sycamore roots. Additionally, that tree was planted directly adjacent to a sewer line, which is a questionable planning choice in my mind, because now, as you can see, the roots are kind of encircling that sewer line, and who knows what's going on underground. So in that particular spot, I would have recommended a different species of tree to avoid those issues, right? Other end of the spectrum, the yard shown on the bottom photo is suffering from a lack of trees. This home is without cooling shade for the house and for the sidewalk for people walking by. It's without the beauty of a tree. And additionally, it's probably using a lot of water in order to manage that lawn, plus all the care for the large lawn. And, you know, they're not benefiting from the increased property value that they could have, which is something that mature trees naturally bring. People, properties with nice mature trees tend to have a slightly higher value. So many benefits there. Let's make good use, good smart use of your space. And Sac Tree is here to help. We offer expert advice with one-on-one consultations, and that is a meeting with one of our community foresters, and they'll talk about tree placement and tree species selection with you. Many of you have probably already participated in this. We've been doing the program since 1990. Then once you have your consultation, you can get up to 10 free trees delivered, depending on how much room you have, but up to 10 trees. You can sign up for this program on our website. It runs all year round. And then we'll set up a virtual appointment with a forester, and they'll talk you through, you know, where to plant and help guide you in choosing the right tree. This program offers about 30 different species choices that vary slightly in availability throughout the year. And winter is actually a really great time to plant. So if this is something that looks really interesting for you and you think, you know, I have always heard about this mud program, but I've never gotten a tree from it, I encourage you to plant late fall and winter. It's a really busy time of year for us when it's hot. Ironically, a lot of people are thinking about shade, but if you wait just a little bit, you'll have a much quicker experience, and the ground will be nice and soft when it's time to actually put the tree in. So let's talk about some of the wonderful and water-wise trees you can enjoy in your yard. If you haven't already been to our website, sactree.org, we have a searchable tree database of 80 species that we recommend for the region, and we call that our Shady 80. And these are all trees that really thrive in our climate. We handpicked all the choices in the Shady 80 to make sure they are easy, popular ones that are going to be a success, right? So we chose trees that are not difficult to care for, trees that do not use a lot of water, trees that are not overly susceptible to common pests and disease, and trees that are not already overplanted in the region. Again, because we are thinking about diversity of the urban forest as a whole as well. And since there's so many great options, tell you about some of our favorites. So I would love to spend a few days talking in detail about all 80 of our favorite trees with you. But that would be a much longer talk. I've narrowed it down to a few of my favorites, which I thought might be new to some of you. Um, I picked trees that some of them are a little bit less common, but I think could be more common. And all the trees that I'm going to highlight are currently available as part of our shade tree program with SMUD. So let's dive in. The first trees I want to talk about are oak trees. And that is because oaks offer so much to our landscapes. And if you haven't considered planting one, here is my plug for oaks. There are 3 native oaks that are from our region in Sacramento, and they are so well adapted to our hot and dry summers because they have been thriving in this climate for thousands of years, right? They're easy to grow. Also, there is a misconception that they grow slowly. However, that is not true. When oaks are given modest amounts of water weekly when they're young, they will shoot right up and grow quite quickly. I can look out my window right now and see an oak I planted when my daughter was born 9 years ago, and that tree is about 25 feet tall right now. So in addition to that, another key benefit to oaks that you might not have thought of is the wildlife. For example, if you are a birder, oaks will bring so many more birds to your yard. And the reason for that is all of the insects. Oak trees support more insects than any other tree in our region. And when I'm talking about insects, I'm talking often tiny little bugs that you wouldn't really notice necessarily, but that associate with the tree. And that in turn brings all the other wildlife to the oaks to eat the insects. So that includes something like an acorn woodpecker, which would eat insects and acorns that you see in the top right there. And even hummingbirds will rest and nest in oak trees and supplement their diet of nectar with protein from insects. So there's so much beauty and variety and benefits that we can get from them. And let's talk about a few of those trees. So here is the valley oak, and majestic is really the word that comes to my mind when I think of this tree. Because when it is very mature, the branches can grow very wide and very sculptural. It's also really adaptable in many landscapes. And what I mean by that is it can grow in a very low water situation. And it also can grow in a wetter area like a lawn as well. It's a tree that grows in riparian areas of the region. And by that, I mean along rivers and streams. And so it's used to having its roots a little bit in the water, or it can also grow further away from rivers as well. And so really adaptable to a wide variety of landscapes. It is a deciduous tree, so its lobed leaves that you see there do come off in the fall. They're bright green in the summer, and they turn kind of a yellow to russet color in the fall. Usually not until just after Thanksgiving, so you get the shade for the whole time that that we need it with the heat. It's also the largest oak in California. And so you do need more space for it. And you'd want to put it at least 18 feet away from your foundation and at least 8 feet away from any concrete, like a driveway or sidewalk or something like that, because it does take up quite a lot of space. When it's not pruned, the branches can kind of hang down a little bit. But if you have space, definitely one of my favorite choices. All right, so the next oak I want to feature is the interior live oak. This, in comparison to the valley oak, this is a evergreen oak, and it has darker green leaves with kind of a slightly thicker texture. And this tree is often found in kind of intermediate areas between, just up from like a riverbank, but not quite in the hills so much, right? Kind of in that middle area. Um, the transitions, the transition zones. So there are a lot of interior live oaks in citrus heights and Orangevale in particular in our area. That's where I see a high concentration of them. Um, Another interesting thing about the interior live oak is that they can have a multi-trunk form, and that's really common for them. So the large tree I show there on the left is a single trunk version for the most part. It's kind of hard to tell because the bottom is cut off, but um, often when you see this tree grow in like along the river or nearby, it'll have multi-trunk. And a lot of people really like that look. It's a little bit more different and um, again, adds a really neat aesthetic look to your yard. This is a different species than the coast live oak, and I just want to point that out. The coast live oak is very similar looking, however, it grows more along the coast, as the name implies, and also kind of in the hills in between, like the Bay Area and the Valley. So they can overlap in range a little bit in that area, but it is a different species, and that this one here is especially well adapted to Sacramento. One note about acorns on this tree. They don't occur quite as often as they do on the other native oaks because this species the acorns take longer to mature. So if you don't like acorns or you don't, for some reason, this may be a good choice for you because they're not going to be as common. But when they do happen, they're very pretty, kind of a tan color with brown stripes. So this is still a large tree, but it can be planted slightly closer um, to buildings and such than the valley, which was a little bit wider. All right, and the last oak that I want to highlight before we talk about some other species is the blue oak. The blue oak is a deciduous tree like the valley oak, and the mature trees, the name blue oak comes from the kind of bluish green distinct leaves, which get this very light waxy coating on the leaves that you don't really notice until you're kind of comparing it to the greener color of the other trees around it. And that coating makes the tree especially tolerant of dry conditions. So this is a tree that in its native range grows in kind of drier, more challenging locations, sometimes further up hills, further away from water sources, compared to the valley oak and interior live oak. So this is the tree that you're seeing when you're looking at, in the hills around Folsom or in El Dorado Hills, that type of thing. That's where the blue oak is really thriving. And another adaptation, in addition to the leaves, is that the blue oak can be summer deciduous. This doesn't happen in most years, but it can happen in a drought year, and it's a very smart adaptation for the tree, where if we have a particularly dry year, the tree will lose some of its leaves in the summer to kind of protect itself and just go into kind of an early dormancy before winter. It's very easy to care for because it's very adaptable and it is a low water user. And I also want to share that, I notice I've been an arborist for many years. I've been doing work like this for a couple of decades, and I see a trend that the blue oaks are getting more rare and they're not as commonly planted or replaced when they do have to be removed as are other oak species. And that's really a shame because I think they're a very beautiful tree. That's my plug for blue oaks and oaks in our landscape. But I would also like to share some of my other favorite trees for a large space that are non-native. So one example is the Zelkova tree. It is from Japan. However, it has been planted in the US for a very long time and does extremely well here. One of the best features about the Zelkova is the lovely shape. Some people describe it as an umbrella that spreads out wide. I've also heard people say it's vase shaped, which, picture a vase with a bouquet of flowers kind of spreading and opening out. It has a really lovely form and a really nice shady spread. The Zelkova is also a very fast growing tree. And because it is deciduous, it can have some fall color as well. And that's what you're seeing in the photo of the large tree. It is that tree is just starting to turn color in the late fall. Another reason that it's commonly planted and a favorite for home landscapes and as a city street tree is that it's very low litter. And that means that it doesn't drop anything really except for the leaves in the fall. It doesn't have any, big fruit or, acorns. It's not an oak tree or anything like that. So if you're wary of stuff falling out of your tree, if you want to, not a lot to sweep out, just leaves that fall, this would be a really good choice. And a lot of folks have not heard this name before, the Zelkova. However, it is very commonly planted around the region. And once you get to know it a little bit and you start to recognize the shape of the tree and the leaves as you go around, you'll see it all over the place. It's very happy here. Right. So the last large tree I want to highlight is the California incense cedar. So if you're looking for an evergreen tree in a narrow shape and you like the classic look of a conifer like that, I highly recommend planting an incense cedar. So this tree is native to California. However, it grows further up in the Sierra, several thousand feet elevation. However, it can also be planted and does very well down here in the valley. One thing I love about it is the bark is very reddish and very attractive. And it's really nice choice if you like the look of something like a coast redwood, one of our state trees, of course. But you know that the coast redwood is not the best choice always for Sacramento because it's such a high water user, right? Redwoods are from the wet, cool, and foggy North Coast, and they can struggle with the climate here in Sacramento. But if you want a tree like that, that's a much lower water user, the incense cedar is a much easier option and has a really similar look and feel, a nice fragrance, and easy to grow. Okay, so we've talked about a number of large trees, and I want to talk about a few of my favorite medium-sized trees. So if you have a slightly smaller yard, you don't have enough space for an oak or a Zelkova, or you're wanting a tree that is not quite as tall, I have a few of my favorite medium trees to share. So the strawberry tree is very, very showy, and it has so many beautiful features. So one of the most popular is the bark. It's a very bright red bark, kind of like a manzanita um, in color with that really, really reddish color. Also, the flowers are really lovely. You can see them there on the top right. They're a very tiny and pink flower shaped like a little urn, a kind of closed little flower that grow in bunches like that all over the tree in the early summer. And then the name, the strawberry tree, comes from the fruit that it produces. And the strawberries are not true strawberries. They're not like the berry that you know. However, they look similar in color and shape, although they're a little bit smaller. They're more like the size of a large grape. Uh, and while they are edible, I don't think they're the tastiest fruit in the world. They're harmless and fine to eat, and some people like to eat them, but I think they're not my favorite fruit in the world. I like the tree for its um, aesthetic qualities. So it's also pretty fast growing, and you can plant it in a wide variety of landscapes. It's pretty adaptable to if you do still have a lawn versus if you have a more water-wise landscape, it'll be fine in either way. The one thing I would caution against is that I would not recommend this tree near a pool or a parking lot because of all the beautiful stuff on it does fall off at some point in its life. And so the berries can be a little messy. And if you have it in a low water landscape with like mulch and other plants, you'll never notice the berries. They'll just kind of like drop down and meld into the mulch and stuff. But if you had it like right next to your driveway, you would probably notice it and it might be a little annoying. Um, but other than that, it is very easy to care for because it's such a low water user. And it's also an evergreen tree. So it keeps its leaves all year round and provides that beauty and the screening and privacy all year round as well. So next is the Wilson olive, and don't let this tree's name fool you. While it is technically an olive tree, this variety, the Wilson olive, produces almost zero fruit. And so it's a great choice when you want a tree that is not messy. Um, just like the traditional olive trees that are native to the Mediterranean region, this variety of olive is very, very hardy and very drought tolerant. Um, and once it gets established, its branches kind of spread just a little bit and give a real twisting sculpture that gives it a really distinctly rustic appearance that I'm a fan of. And like I said, it is evergreen, so it keeps its silver greenish leaves throughout the year. Again, just like the strawberry tree, making it a great option if you want to benefit from year-round cooling or privacy. So this may be a new tree to you, but I would like to introduce you to the Persian ironwood. So it really stands out with a dazzling spring show of red flowers that you see there on the bottom left, and a really attractive kind of peeling bark on a mature tree makes this a really gorgeous addition to the landscape. However, the leaves are really the standout feature of this tree because when they come out in the spring, they're kind of a reddish purple color, really dark and showy. And then they'll be green throughout the summer. But then in the fall, there's a very reliable fall show with the leaves turning orange, yellow, and red. Um, it's not a very common tree in the region, but I think it should be more common. Um, like the name implies, it's native to the Middle East, but it does very well here in Sacramento with our hot, dry summers. And another um, feature is that, if you want some real beauty on your tree, but without a lot of messy fruit, this would be another good choice. So it could be planted well near a driveway or a pool or something like that. So I hope you might give this beauty a try. So next, let's get to know some smaller trees for when you have a tight spot to fit a tree in. Because a tree the size of the Vitex, you can plant up to 6 feet away from your house foundation and 4 to 5 feet away from any hardscape, and it'll be just fine. Um, Smaller trees can also be sited very close to overhead power lines because they only grow about 15 feet tall or so. So the chase tree or vitex, but I hear both names used as a common name. It's small, but it can spread out kind of wide in a way that's really useful for beautifying a small area. Its flowers are probably one of its favorite features. They are fragrant and showy purple flowers. The vitex is a tree, but it's actually in the same family as mint and rosemary and sage. So they're all in the same plant family, and you can kind of get that sense when you have the fragrant and like the leaves and that type of thing, but it is actually a tree. They tend to grow lower branches and can easily have kind of a multi-trunk, more shrub-like form. However, I've seen many of them pruned up in a tree-like form, so that's really up to you and what you encourage it when it's young. It can take either shape. Um, and it's extremely hardy and water-wise, does not need a lot of water in order to thrive. But just a warning that it does not do well in moisture environments. So some trees are a little more adaptable and can kind of take either way, but this one is not one that I would plant in a lawn if you have a lawn. All right. Right. So what's not to love about this beautiful and low water fruit tree? So the pineapple guava um, has really beautiful foliage that kind of has a silvery sheen to it, similar to that fruitless olive tree, right? And it is also evergreen, like the olive, and has year-round leaves to provide screening. In fact, I've seen it planted as a hedge even, which I thought was a little odd, but you could have seen it made into a hedge, even though it can be a tree. But really one of the best features is those flowers that you see. They're really, really showy and a good size, you know, kind of a pinkish white flower with those beautiful bright red stamens that attract hummingbirds. So actually, I have not tried this, but I'm told the flower petals are edible and taste a bit like marshmallows. So it's not only the fruit that produces after a few years, but the flowers are edible as well. And if you haven't had a pineapple guava fruit, those are produced in the fall and winter, and they have a really, you know, tropical flavor, and you can eat them raw or cook them into desserts. Very delicious if you haven't tried that. And again, you can train this into a single trunk tree. They often grow in a kind of a multi-trunk form like you see in the center there. Right, so now that we have gotten to know some of our favorite trees, um, if you have questions about more options or more selection, just keep in mind that you can check out sactree.org at any time and check out our Shady 80 list and read all the details that you desire about all the different trees we recommend for the region. And you can also search that database for specific characteristics. Like you could say, you know, I want medium-sized tree with fall color that's low water use, and it'll spit you out all the options. So that's always there as a resource, as are the Sacramento Shade program with SMUD, and we're happy to help give you a one-on-one consultation as long as you're a SMUD customer. All right, so once you select your tree and you have your location ready and you're going to get it in the ground, do not forget that proper planting is key. Trees that are grown in containers need some help to be ready to put in the ground. And so it's important to liberate the root ball, as I like to say. And what I mean by that is when you take the tree out of the pot, really loosen up the root with your fingers, really get in there and kind of stretch the roots out wide so that they can grow out like they want to. That will really help the tree get established more quickly and grow faster. Also, make sure you're planting it at the right height. You don't want to bury the tree and the base of the trunk under too much soil. And you also don't want it to be sticking up too high to be too exposed. There is just the right depth where you start to see the hint of the root flare, and that is at the soil line, and that's just what you want. If that all sounds good to you, great, carry on. And if you want to hear a little bit more about how to plant, we have a very excellent 5-minute video at sactree.org that walks you through all the details of planting, and that's available all the time. Once the tree is planted, laying some wood chip mulch thickly like this around the tree will save you a ton of water and also suppress many weeds naturally. There are so many benefits to having wood chip mulch on top of your soil like a blanket. The The main one being that it is saving water by insulating the soil. You really need to reduce how much water you're using if you have mulch on your landscape because of the way that it insulates the soil and helps retain moisture. It's a huge benefit. The other thing to think about mulch is that it's not only helping you save water right now, right this year, but it is helping your tree in the future in a couple of ways. One is that when I'm talking about mulch, I'm talking about wood chips. All right, I'm talking about like chipped up trees. Um, so it's like a little bit of everything, a little bit of wood, a little bit of bark, a little bit of leaves, a little bit of branches, all chipped up, right? A big mixture. And when you have that on top of your soil, um, it's organic matter, right? Just like you put in your green waste, right? And that organic matter is breaking down over time and providing nutrients to your plants naturally over time. It's like fertilizer that you don't have to pay for. Okay. And so that is very, very helpful for having healthy, fast growing trees. Additionally, one amazing thing about mulch and water savings is, like I said, it's not just saving you water now, but in the future, because when you increase the amount of organic matter in your soil, you increase the water holding capacity of your soil, and you give your soil and thus your plants and trees the ability to have more water in the future without applying more water. So very, very beneficial. Um, and like you see here, if you have a young tree, what we like to describe is the mulch is a fluffy donut. So it's not right against the trunk for the same reason you don't plant the tree too deeply, but it is a thick ring around the tree. All right. In comparison, around a mature tree, um, you know, if you have a donut, that becomes of mulch, it becomes a lot bigger when you have a bigger trunk, a bigger canopy. So what I recommend showing in these examples here is just, put as much an area as makes sense in your landscape with mulch, because the roots of the tree grow really wide under the canopy, as much space as they can have, right? And so the more areas that you can spread out that mulch, it will benefit your tree. And as you can see in these examples, it doesn't mean your entire yard needs to be covered in mulch. You can still have a landscape with different features that suit your practical and aesthetic needs, right? So if mulch is so amazing, where do you get this magical stuff? It must be super expensive, right? Actually, the best things in life are free, right? So you can get mulch for no cost from SMUD. Um, the SMUD yard has mulch that you can pick up for small loads. Like if you're just, planted a few new trees at your house and you want to get just a little bit, you can pick it up from their yard, which is right on Folsom Boulevard. Um, Alternatively, if you want a lot because you want to be mulching your entire yard, you can get a whole truckload of mulch dropped off for free from a local tree company. And if you aren't already connected with a local arborist or tree company, you can get on a list like the service that's called Chip Drop. And Chip Drop is a website that's kind of like a matchmaking service between tree companies looking to get rid of a truckload of mulch and homeowners are looking to get mulch for their yards. And so you can enter your address, how much you're looking for. You can only get a full load or more. But then when they're in their area, in your area, you'll pop up and they'll call you and say, hey, do you want mulch? And you can say yes or no. But I've gotten that a few times from my yard. It's very convenient. It is a very large pile of mulch, and so I've shared it with a neighbor before. But that's just another way to get all set with wood chips for your yard. So let's talk about how to water mature trees. Because in my experience, giving a class like this or similar for the last 10 years or so, this is one of the questions that people want to talk about the most is, I have a mature tree, I have trees in my landscape, and I don't want to waste water and I want to take care of them. I don't know what to do. And so the first thing I want to say is that we need to think about the structure of the mature tree. So that um, the roots are really closer to the surface. Okay, so picture this tree as a wine glass sitting on a plate. Okay, so this is my metaphor where there's the wine glass, the canopy, the bowl, right? And then the stem, the trunk, and then sitting on a dinner plate. Okay, so the roots, but not very deep, right? So the roots can spread out past the canopy if there's space, or if not, they won't be that far, right? But the roots are really only in the top couple feet of soil. And that's because that's where the water is, that's where the soil microorganisms are, that's where there's not a bunch of rocks typically. It's a good place to grow, and that's where the roots are going to be. So where we want to apply the water is toward what we call the drip line. And that's where, kind of the edge of the canopy in and around that region where the canopy ends, because that's where the feeder roots are. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the water is not applied by the trunk and it doesn't need to go super deeply. It only needs to go down about, a foot to 2 feet, right? Because that's where the roots are. So if you have a mature tree and you're not sure how to water it, the first thing to do is check the soil. Okay, and you can use a variety of tools to do that. You can use a soil moisture meter, which are, pretty inexpensive, maybe $10. You can stick it in and it'll tell you if it's dry or wet. My favorite is to just kind of feel it with my hand. So I can dig down with like a little trowel or something. And dig down a little ways and feel the soil in my hand and does it feel very sticky and wet, or does it feel dry and crumbly? And if it feels dry, it's time to water and I can apply the water. One way to do it, like I'm showing in this picture, is with a soaker hose. And so you can see in the photo that the soaker hose is circled around in what we call the drip line of the tree. It's not right by the trunk, but it's sort of toward the edge of the canopy, just in and around that area, right? And so you want to have it water slowly so that the water's not just running off, but that slow soaking over several hours to the point where it can really get down at least like 1.5 feet. And how long it takes to get down will depend on your soil and what else is in your landscape and things like that. But I would start, a good target for many trees would be watering about once a month in the dry season with a soaker hose like that for several hours. And then, if you want to test it, the next day, dig down again and see like, how far did the water make it down? Did it make it down like a foot? Great. And if you're like, okay, that all makes sense, Pam, but like, I don't really want to be digging with a trowel in my yard all the time. That sounds like a lot of work. I hear you. I don't want you to be digging around with a trowel for the rest of your life either. However, if you do it just a few times in order to understand your soil drainage, just a couple times, in order to understand like how long you need to run your water and how often, you won't have to do it again, right? You can, next summer, you can be like, okay, this is how long I ran it for, and this is how often I did it, and it worked out great. It's just when you're starting to get to know your soil. If you have more questions about this, I'm happy to talk more in the Q&A, and you can also email me. But the once a month and then the slow soak toward the edge is really the key, right? And I also want to point out that in addition to being pretty doable, right, this is not expensive in terms of how much you're actually spending on the water that a tree wants. We have run a really conservative estimate that it's about $3 a month to water a large mature tree well. It's not a waste of water. It's a very smart use of water. And it's, less than the price of a coffee these days, to keep your tree happy. So let's talk about young trees as well. If you have a brand new tree that you're planting, their water needs are a little bit different. Because they haven't grown out yet, they're going to need water right by the trunk because that's where the roots are to start, right? And instead of watering once a month, we're watering about 1 to 2 times per week. And I'm able to give a little bit more of a specific recommendation for a young tree, because they need about 5 to 10 gallons of water each time they're watered. So Jace mentioned the watering buckets that you can get from the water district. And that is a great way to do that. We gave them those buckets because they are exactly 5 gallons. So you know how much you're giving to the tree. And we've drilled a very small little 1/8 inch diameter hole in each of the bottom of the buckets. And the benefit there is you fill the bucket up, you put it next to the young tree, and you know it's getting just the water it needs. But the little hole means it takes about 30 to 40 minutes for the water to drain out. And that slow application of water is really key to make sure that the water stays with the roots and doesn't just all run off the area because it's applied too quickly, right? You can also use a soaker hose curled up a little more tightly right around the tree for a young tree, or a drip line with emitters also works well. If you do use a drip line with emitters, that is a very easy choice once you have your system set up. However, I just want to make sure you're keeping in mind that emitters drip out very small amounts of water. And so to get enough water for your tree, you typically need multiple emitters per tree, or you need to run it for a longer time. And it's not a crazy amount of water. Again, we're talking about like 10 to 15 gallons total per week for a young tree. But just keep in mind that that's a lot of emitters around a tree, and you want to make sure it's actually getting the thorough soak that it needs. So I'm going to share a couple of great water efficiency tools when you're irrigating your landscape. The most basic is the hose bib timer. So if you are using a soaker hose, that's something that, you just connect your regular garden hose to the soaker hose, and then you lay the soaker hose out. It's like a very low tech drip system. But if you're worried about that you get distracted easily by your family or whatnot, you can connect it to a hose bib timer and set a time, and it'll turn off when the timer goes off, and then you don't have to worry about it running for too long. It can be just what you need. Additionally, a smart irrigation controller, if you do set up a drip system or different hydro zones in your landscape, using a smart irrigation controller that you actually manage on your phone can be really smart. And there's a rebate for that when you get a WaterWise house call with the water district. So if that sounds intriguing to you and you haven't done that already, definitely check that out. So I think I've made this point in a variety of ways throughout our chat today, but I just want to be clear that if you want to save water in your yard, and if you want to have a water-wise, river-friendly garden, you need to plant and protect trees. What I like about this landscape and this photo here is that there is a wide variety of plants and trees featured for diversity, for different for beauty, getting different things out of it, different colors, textures. There's shade, it's low water use, and it's easy maintenance, right? So just as an example, I moved into a house that has oak trees with many plants growing underneath it. And I find it very easy to maintain in the fall because I have no lawn. And what happens in the fall is all the little oak leaves drop, and they kind of just meld into the mulch. I don't have to do a lot of raking. I just sweep my front walkway and my driveway, and I'm done. One thing to note, however, is in this photo, there's some oak trees in kind of the top left, and you'll see that there's not plants planted directly adjacent to the roots. The plants are just a few feet off to protect the tree from getting any soggy feet. All right, so another common question I get is that, okay, so we want shade and we want low water plants, but a lot of the low water plants that are available for purchase are sun loving. How do I deal with that? Or what if I have a big shady tree in my yard and I have a lawn, but I want to convert it to a water-wise landscape? I don't know what the plant that's going to thrive in the shade and still look really beautiful. And I just want to share that there are many options for just that scenario. And I highlighted a few of my favorites here. All of these photos I got from the UC Davis Arboretum All-Stars list. And if you're not familiar with them, they're a wonderful resource, and they also have a plant sale. And with the UC Davis Arboretum All-Stars plant list, you can also search their database for low water shrubs and plants that grow in shade or partial shade. So if you have that situation as well, I just want to point you to a resource like this with so many options. All right, and the last thing I want to share before we wrap up is that if you haven't thought about this, mulch does not have to show. I see a lot of water-wise landscapes planted with a sea of mulch with little plants dotted around in it, and that looks totally fine and lovely. However, I learned the hard way that it's a little more maintenance with weeding and just caring for the plants and things like that. And I've had a much easier time having a landscape more like this. And this is not my yard. This is just one I saw and loved. But filling in all the spaces with plants and trees and having mulch kind of underneath is very easy maintenance and looks, that's kind of how it looks in nature, right? So having a yard full of water-wise plants is actually much easier because the weeds are so minimal and they're being outcompeted by everything else. So that's my plug for enjoying trees and enjoying water-wise plants in your yard. And I am so thankful to you for spending your time with me today. You have so many other things you could be doing, and you're here to nerd out about trees with me. And we're really grateful to work with Citrus Heights. So thank you for having us. And if we have a few minutes, I'm happy to stay and answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. I do have a few questions. First off, just wanted to say again, thank you. That was a great presentation, and I'm taking a lot away from it. And, before, if you aren't hanging around for the questions, I just want to remind everybody that the winner of the raffle will be emailed. So keep an eye out on email boxes for an email from the Citrus Water District on that. So just to get into the questions, though, I have one where a customer has three redwood trees. They're about 35 years of age, and they water 3 to 4 times a week for about 4 hours. And yeah, they want to know. So the rest of the yard's drip, but they want to know if there's anything else they can do to keep the trees healthy. Is there anything that you can think of?
Yeah, so keeping in mind that coast redwoods do have a tougher time here in Sacramento than a lot of other trees, and they are going to need more water than other trees in your landscape. They are not really a water-wise choice. However, if you already have them and you want to keep them, the best way to keep them happy is by having a lot of mulch underneath them, again, to help retain the moisture in the soil and to water them about every 2 weeks, which is a little more frequently than about the once a month that a lot of other species would need in the summer. Another thing that you can do if you have the space with your redwoods is to not prune up the lower branches. If you can, leave some of the lower branches, that shading and the way that the transpiration happens in the redwoods will help it retain moisture too, but you don't always have space for that. But if you do, lower branches, mulch, and a really thorough soak about every 2 weeks is the best care.
Okay, great. And another question is about planting trees next to pools. So, is there any that you recommend this person to ask specifically about olive trees? And I know that's something you covered, or fruitless olive trees in the class. But is that one that you would recommend, or is there another?
Yeah, so when you're thinking about trees near a pool, um, the in addition to thinking about like you don't want the roots to be a conflict, so you want to be probably a little further away than you'd think in terms of the trunks. But it's about what type of litter the tree is dropping. So I think it's a lot easier to have trees, kind of counterintuitive, but have trees dropping stuff that's larger rather than tiny because it won't clog your pool filter, right? So if you have um, a tree like a Zelkova near your pool, even though it's like really low litter and really easy, the stuff that it does drop is a lot smaller and might be trickier to deal with versus something with larger pieces like that Persian ironwood or even the fruitless olive or things like that are going to be a lot easier to clean out and to then like um you the little filtery thing, the little brush thing that you put like in your pool to like capture the stuff. It's going to be a lot easier if the stuff is bigger, which is like I said, a little counterintuitive, but that's something I would think about. Um Also, I mean, I say this, think about the litter because there's no tree that drops nothing. All trees have stuff as part of their biology, as part of their reproduction, as how they've survived for hundreds of thousands of years on our planet. And so you just kind of think about what stuff is going to be easiest for you in your scenario.
Okay. And another participant is asking about trees. They're noticing that it seems like trees are turning yellow a little bit earlier on in the year. Is that something that is due to the excessive heat? Is that something that's happening? Are we getting to autumn earlier?
Yeah, so yellowing in leaves can be, there's, many, many factors that can cause that. For a tree that turns yellow in the fall, if it's turning yellow early, it can be due to low water. That can be a sign of water stress, that it's not quite getting enough and it's not quite as bright green. So that can be a sign that you could be underwatering a tree. Um, Yellow leaves is also a sign of a nutrient issue. And so that can mean you have too much or too little of a nutrient, and you may need to fertilize. And again, my favorite way to fertilize is with wood chip mulch because it provides nutrients at a rate that's really easy for the trees to take up, and you don't worry about over fertilizing. Um, so if the tree's leaves are yellow and they're not typically yellow, or you see other people with the same plant have leaves that are a lot greener, you may want to look at what thing is stressing the tree out, whether it's the water, the fertilization, the competition, things like that. Because plants, our climate here is very hot and very dry, but also a lot of plants can thrive in it with just, very minimal.
Okay. Another question is about Western redbud. They planted it about 9 months ago, and it's seeming like it's not growing too fast. They're watering it 2 to 3 times a week with a 5-gallon bucket, but it still kind of seems dwarfish. Is there any type of recommendations that to help it grow or kickstart it a little bit more?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So Western redbud, wonderful small tree, large shrub, native to the area. I'm a big fan of them. I have one myself. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of trees are going to not grow a lot the first year on top. And that's because the first year in the ground, the plant is putting a lot of energy into getting established with the roots and growing underground. And so you're not seeing that progress, but it's really important because once that root foundation is laid, then the plant can shoot up more a lot on the top. And so in the first year, you really want to encourage strong root growth. Again, mulch, I'm a broken record about that, and the thorough but infrequent soaking. And so with a redbud, they're a native and they're really a low water use tree. And so I would drop down your watering to At this time in August, like a thorough soak once per week. I don't think it's going to need it more frequently than that if it's been in the ground 6 months or more. And so for that particular tree, I would probably reduce the watering just a little bit and watch it really take off in the next few years.
Okay, and you mentioned mulch. It's a little bit further down the line in questions, but since you brought it up, people are wondering, is there a specific type of mulch that you recommend? They're just worried about harming the ground or with a specific type of mulch.
Sure, yeah. So there's no mulch that's bad. However, my favorite is the kind that you can get from a tree company. And the reason being is it's a mixture, right? So it's when you get it from a tree company, it has it's everything they chipped up when like a tree was pruned or had to be removed, right? So it's a little bit of bark, a little bit of branches, a little bit of leaves, and it will really be easy to care for because it kind of like when it settles in a little bit, it forms kind of like a little mat and it doesn't blow around a lot in the wind or get washed away in the rain as easily as like a redwood nugget type of mulch or something that you might purchase in a bag from like a, garden center, right?
Hmm.
And the reason I like that kind too is because it breaks down in a really good way. Like we mentioned, all the benefits there. Um, the best kind of mulch is the kind that you can get for free. However, if you're not able, if you don't want a whole truckload, which is a lot, right? Or you're not able to get to SMUD to pick up a small amount, you can, um, or if you like really want, if it's aesthetically really important to you to have the mulch be like all the same color or something, you can purchase it. And you can get a load delivered from a place like Hasties or like Capital Sand and Gravel or something like that. Um, but just keep in mind that a lot of those mixes have a lot of other fillers and sometimes like plywood and stuff like that. And so you're not going to get as beneficial a product, even though it may look more even. But again, having mulch is better than having no mulch. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna cut it off with two more questions, but just one here that's come up a few times in the Q&A is tree stakes and when to take the stake off, how long to keep it on for. Can you get into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a slide about that, but then I took it off because I was worried about time. But yes, so tree stakes really help it when it's young. However, you want to leave them on for as short a time as possible. That can be like 6 months or that can be like a year and a half, depending on the root growth. Because it's time to take the stakes off when two things are true, when the tree can stand up all on its own and it doesn't need support, and when you can shake the tree gently and look down at the roots and see that the roots are not moving. Because that means the roots are established, they're solid, and the tree is ready to go. Simple shake test.
Okay, great. And then last one we can end on this one is what are your thoughts about you mentioned native plants and you also mentioned non-native trees. Uh, do you have kind of a preference? I know right now there's a lot of talk about native trees, but do you feel like non-native trees have their place as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Okay.
so I try to make the case for both in our talk today by highlighting, three native trees, those oaks to our region as being really excellent options, or like the valley oak that you see in the photo right here. However, like I also mentioned, the key to a healthy urban forest is diversity, because in really urban areas, um, landscape, for lack of a better word, is fake. It doesn't have, it's not natural anymore with all of the hardscape and the extra heat coming off the asphalt and the lack of connectivity, and all those things affect the ecology of our urban forest. And so to keep it as resilient as possible, it needs to be as diverse as possible so that whatever situations we encounter with a changing climate or with different pests and disease that may come in, we have a wide variety of trees of different species at different ages that can absorb those impacts. And so in an urban area, the native trees to your region are an excellent choice, and non-native proven trees for the region are also really important.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'm going to cut it off there. We're a little over time. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate it. I hope you guys got a lot out of this class. If you have any questions, like follow-up questions or anything like that, you can always email us at the water efficiency email. And come into the office and grab a tree watering bucket. We're excited to pass them out, and they're here for you. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. Take care, everyone.